coming to special interests, lobbying groups that will impact the kind of legislation that they will have, and that essentially corrupts the democratic process. Now, you say that you don't represent the special interests, but at some point, though, doesn't there come a point usually with a lot of these Congress people where sometimes it just happens? Sometimes you just succumb to them, no matter if you intended to or not?
Well, I have noticed that there are certainly Congress people of both parties who seem to drink that Potomac water and something funny happens to their judgment.
Yeah.
And there's a number of different things we should look at on that, but a big piece of it, really goes to the electorate, and we should be electing citizen legislators. When the special interests have influence, when they are when the elected officials care more about being reelected than about doing the right thing, and that's endemic for somebody who's a career politician. And so, Congressman Polis has been in elective office for 10 years, and that's a long time. That's indicative of somebody who's changed his career to being in government. Uh-huh. And for that kind of a person, then being reelected becomes pretty important. And the other thing is, what we really need to do is we need to get government to be less influential in our lives so that there's just less to fight over. The money seeks politics because government is so large, spends so much, regulates so much, it's so influential on the choices that Americans make and on distribution of money in America that it becomes worth fighting over. I am not. People talk about somebody being a pro-business this or that. I am a pro-market, a pro-competition, and a pro-freedom candidate. So I want government not to tilt the playing field on those things.
I had a question for you, Mr. Weissmann, about the youth vote, and how it's played such an important role, especially in District 2, especially in Boulder. There's a huge proportion of students in this area, and in Fort Collins,
now with the new congressional boundaries,
that are looking for their interests as well, especially when you see college students graduating with mountains of debt, and the future is kind of scary, especially if you're leaving college. In what way would you, as a candidate, help college students?
The thing that we need to focus on, and this isn't just for college students, but it's for everyone in America, is we need economic growth. When you look at what's going on there, the lack of economic growth translates into a lack of economic opportunity. I can tell you that my oldest son, David, is 24 years old, recently graduated from college, hardworking, smart, well-educated, and it's awfully tough out there to get that career started, to make that transition to an adult life, and so I feel those challenges personally. But it's really from my view that the anxieties faced by college students, which are very, very sensible anxieties, faced by working families, faced by everybody in the United States who's looking at a very troubling economic future. Today's report being a great example. So what we should be looking for is an economic growth agenda. Mine has three parts to it. One we talked about already, which is regulation. I have also put forth positions on reforming taxation to make that much more growth friendly as well as fairer. And in addition, we got to get the spending under control, because that overhang of debt really restrains the economy, makes it hard for people to, say, invest in creating opportunity. So my first answer is on economic growth, and we need to elect people who understand economic growth, who understand the free markets, take the right lessons from it, and can take that sense to D.C. I'm glad to talk more about tuition and stuff more specifically if you like, but I think that those are the big issues, that whether you're 18 and voting in your first election, or you're 85 and you've been voting for 60 plus years, that economic growth is the key to our future, and that's what I'm about.
we're talking with congressional candidate Eric Weissmann for Congressional District 2 of the state of Colorado, and if he gets voted in, he will be sent to Washington on our behalf. And you're quickly talking about taxes, and quickly before we kind of get into more of the social side of things, and then why you would be the best candidate to represent the Republicans, because you have not yet had your primary, the vote. So you're talking about taxes. So what, in your opinion, would be considered growth-friendly taxation?
I think the right approach is for a very broad tax base. In other words, where income broadly is included in the tax base, there are very limited, if any, deductions, credits, special modifications, and that concomitant with that, you would have lower tax rates.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pro-growth kind of policy. Simpson Bowles came out with their tax proposals were very much in line with those, and their most serious proposals on tax reform go along those lines. I would point out that we have the highest corporate taxes in the developed world, and that is very much a disincentive for people to invest in creating jobs here when they could do it in lower tax environments.
So then it would for me to understand this is to basically say you're up for lower tax rates, but the tax incentives would mostly go away, so then that way we could actually get the money in.
Yeah, that's right. And
Mm-hmm.
and those tax incentives change people's behavior.
Right.
That's not healthy either. We have, the example I often use is the state income tax. You get to deduct from your federal taxes what you pay to your state. What that means is, first of all, that people in Colorado, a medium tax state, are subsidizing people in California and New York. I don't think that's fair. People in Texas are subsidizing us here in Colorado. We'll say thank you, but it's still not fair.
Yeah.
But that incentivizes states to spend more. It makes it easier for them to do it. It interferes with that economy. Some of these are complex. People have lobbied for them. You have to have lawyers and accountants to get them. Some of them everybody gets, but it distorts our economy. It's not fair. We need to have a fair tax system that produces the revenue without distorting our economy.
And you were mentioning earlier on that you want the government to basically put everyone on a level playing field. Now, President Obama a couple of weeks ago, he expressed his support for gay marriage, and especially with the debacle that happened with civil unions here in the state of Colorado, it's become a contentious issue. Whether or not it'll be the main issue that really affects voters is a whole other discussion. But just what's your view on the gay marriage civil unions?
Well, first I'll tell you, I don't think it's the federal government's business who marries whom,
mm-hmm.
and I want the government out of that. I've said, with regard to the civil unions bill in Colorado, that had I been in the state legislature, I would have voted for the civil unions bill. But let me tell you that this is about, we're talking about households with two mommies. We ought to be talking about households with zero jobs. Those are the problems we need to be focusing on. The social issues are important, but they're divisive, and if we don't solve the economic problems, we won't have the resources, time to worry about these other things.
So now your Republican primary, when exactly, for people to know, for registered Republicans or independents that might think about registering Republican, when is the date to vote in the Republican primary? Well,
the deadline is the 26th of June.
Okay.
But the ballots will be mailed next week, so
mm-hmm.
it's an all-mail election in most parts of the district, including Boulder County. And so registered Republicans, when you get your ballot in the mail, mark it for Weissmann and send it right back, please.
And so you mark it for Weissmann. Why should they mark it for Weissmann?
Well, my opponent is Senator Kevin Lumberg. He's from Berthoud, Colorado. He also is a long-term career politician. He's been in the State House for 10 years with not much to show for it. The second, and versus me being a business person with a long track record of achievement in that. So it's what kind of a background do you want your congressman to take with him and inform his decisions in Washington? The second thing is that would be a basis for somebody making a decision. Are these social issues? I'm a social moderate and a social libertarian. I think that freedom protects everybody, and we need to stay out of those things.